The Universal One by Walter Russell. Chapter 6. The Sex Principle. Sir Oliver Lodge points out that man has long been familiar with force and motion, but that some third intangible, undiscovered force is recognizably necessary to complete a logical universe. Force and motion infer that the third undiscovered force is existent somewhere back of or with them. He also states that, when discovered, it may prove to be something with which man is already familiar. Sex is the great third principle. Sex is the controlling cause of both force and motion. Without it, neither could continue. To say that mind is the motive power back of force and motion is but stating a generality, but to state an attribute of mind by means of which force and motion are controlled is being specific. Sex is the motive power behind force and motion. Sex is the apparent division of the father-mother substance of mind into apparent opposites. This division is due to the opposite desires of electricity and magnetism expressed in the action and reaction of the thinking process. Sex is the active desire of mind for division into opposites and its reactive desire for unity. Sex is that motive force which demands separability into two and equally desires union of the apparent two into one. Mind, being one, cannot yield to the desire of mind for separation into two. Sex desire of mind for divisibility into two succeeds only in producing an appearance of divisibility into two. Likewise, sex desire of mind for unity into one succeeds only in reproducing an apparent composite of the two. Sex is of all things from the beginning. Sex begins when light begins. Sex is the desire for the appearance of being, which constitutes the appearance of existence. Nothing can be without the desire to be. All things are which desire to be. Desire dominates all thinking. Desire dominates all matter. All desire is sex desire. All desire is for the continuance of existence and the orderliness of existence. Sex desire is that force in thinking which continues thinking. Existence is continued only through thinking. Sex force is that quality in the electromagnetic impulse of thinking which continues one impulse of thinking into the next impulse of thinking. Sex force, like all phenomena of motion, is periodic. Sex periodicity continues the simple beginning of idea into the complexity of idea. Sex force is the builder of the apparently many things out of the reality of the one thing. Periodic variance of sex is the father of desire for the creation of the idea of many things. Remove the image-making faculty of the father force of mind, and the production of idea would discontinue. Variance of sex is the mother of desire for unity of sex. Remove the sex desire of mind for the unity of oneness of the mother force of mind, and reproduction of the idea of mind would discontinue. Matter cannot continue its appearance of existence as form without the desire to continue such an appearance of existence. The material substance of mind cannot evade its materialization into the form desired by mind. This is an immutable law to which there can be no exception. Man's concept of sex as beginning with organic life is a wrong concept. Sex is as absolute in the elements as in the complexities and compounds of the elements. Man's concept of the beginning of sex and the beginning of life is a concept founded on conditions of temperature. Sex and life and light and intelligence are in and of all things from the beginning. The sex principle is as much a part of the granite rock or bar of iron as it is of man. The great hot star called Argo, blazing away at a temperature of 30,000 degrees, knows sex in its fiery heart and cannot continue its appearance without it. The Martian ice cap knows sex in its frozen depths and retains its appearance because of sex. Sex is an electromagnetic equalizer of matter and motion. Sex is the apparent division of the one force into electricity and magnetism, two opposite forces, positive and negative, which are in reality but two pulsations of the one force. Sex is the apparent division of all things into their opposites, male and female. Sex is evolutionary in all things. All things are both male and female. All creation is first male in preponderance, then it is similarly female. All light units and systems of light units are first male-female, then they are female-male. apparent opposites of the indivisible substance of universal mind are not content to remain in the state of apparent opposition. Unity, or oneness, inherent in all things, asserts itself in dissatisfaction when electromagnetic forces of matter and motion are sufficiently generative to cause too great an inequality between the apparent opposites. Sex is unsatisfied when the electromagnetic forces of matter and motion are unequal, and it is satisfied when those forces are equal. A lightning flash is the power of sex equalizing positive and negative electromagnetic disturbances of equilibrium between two oppositely and unequally charged storm clouds. In motion and inertia, sex desire is negative. In motion and opposition, sex desire is positive. It is dynamic. Sex first asserts itself in form. All form appears through sex, passes through a progressive charge called growth, and disappears. All growth is impelled by force and motion and controlled by sex. Neither sex, nor force, nor motion is of itself alone. Each is of the others. Nothing is of itself alone. There can be no force without thinking. There can be no motion without the force of thinking. There can be no idea of mind without sex opposition. There can be no continuity of idea without sex union. Without union and mating, the idea of any one thing would be extinct as an appearance. Thinking and working are the causes of those elements which man calls sex, force, and motion. Without all three of these there could be no appearance of existence, as man knows existence. Thinking and working continue the appearance of all idea from the high to the low octaves of creation. All creating things are but the ideas of divine mind. The whole idea of all things is in the seed of all things. And the seed of idea is the whole of idea. And the seed of the oak is the whole of the oak. And the seed of the rose is the whole of the rose. And the seed of man is the whole of man. The seed of all idea is in thinking. The whole idea of the oak, or the rose, or man is the result of thinking and working for perhaps 1 billion years of continuing the idea of the oak, the rose, or man, and the seed thereof. This is the law of evolving existence. It is as true of complex as it is of simple things. All idea is registered in the little particles heretofore referred to as light units. These units of light, heat, sex, electricity, and magnetism are all male and all female. Every unit is either preponderantly male or preponderantly female. Just so is every unit either preponderantly electric or preponderantly magnetic. Just so is every unit either preponderantly negatively or preponderantly positively electromagnetic. Just so is every unit preponderantly generative or preponderantly radiative. And each unit is all of these. And each unit is variable, becoming preponderantly one or another of these in its turn, from the beginning to the end of its being. And the variability is orderly and governed by measurable laws of periodicity, which are also the laws by which motion is governed. It must not be forgotten that all that man calls creation is the result of motion which is due to the opposing impulses of thinking. It must not be forgotten that a continuance of motion causes a creating and not a created universe. The electromagnetic action of the impulses of thinking is continuous in its opposing, and therefore are the effects of that opposition continuous. Opposing desire in sex expression is the cause of opposing motion. A cause cannot evade its effect. Opposing electromagnetic impulses are sex expression in creative thinking. Opposing electromagnetic impulses reproduce all effects of creative thinking. Form is born true to the rhythm of thinking. All thinking is rhythmic thinking. Idea is synchronous with the rhythm of thinking. All thinking is sex thinking. Creation is the transforming of the one substance by the rhythmic thinking of idea into apparent opposites and into that which man calls form. Beyond this there is no more. Creation is but a concept of mind. It is but an illusion, an effect of thinking. All thinking is registered in light. All light is sex expression. Light is the language of all thinking. Light is the energy of all thinking. All energy is the energy of sex expression. There is no other energy. Through evolving sex, light causes the transition of the universal substance into form. Through sex periodicity, light transforms form into variety of form. This universe of motion is a universe of production, destruction, and reproduction. All form is produced by the male, electropositive, plus action of the charging. Electric oscillation of the universal life principle is destroyed by the female, electronegative, minus reaction of the discharging. Magnetic oscillation, and is reproduced through the union of both by radioactive regeneration and inertia. Chapter 7. Sex opposites of light. Light is the power which God has used to create the appearance of form. Light is power for man to use in the perfection of his body. Therefore must he know the cause of light as he knows his alphabet. He must understand the inexhaustible source of energy which continues matter and motion, if he would know the fullness of energy available to his command. The rhythm of creative thinking is absolute. The registration of creative thinking is absolute. All thinking is creative thinking. All thinking is creating that which it is thinking. Man's power of thinking is in sex opposition of mind. God's power of expressing himself is in transforming that which is his own body into an effect which man calls creation. The Universal One has no other means of expressing idea save through his own body. Man's power of expressing the idea of himself is only through his own body. Man has expressed himself through the creation of his own body by his own thinking, exactly as God has expressed himself through the creation of his own body by his own thinking. Man's body is but an individual effect of the whole of man, and is the product of his thinking. The universe is the total of all individual effects, and is the product of God's thinking. God's thinking is man's thinking. All thinking is the product of mind, and all mind is divine mind. Again must it be written, there are not two minds, nor are there two kinds of minds in the universe. Light is God's medium of expressing himself. It is the only medium at his command. Light is man's medium of expressing himself. It is the only medium at his command. Creation of that which man calls form has a perpetual beginning and a perpetual ending. Its beginning is in thinking. Its end is in thinking. Its beginning is its ending. It has no beginning. It has no ending. There is no stop, no break in the continuity of thinking. To man, its beginning is its appearance within his octaves of perception. To man, its ending is its disappearance beyond his range of perception. Form is born of the desire to express idea. Form is the plaything of idea. All form is form of sex. Idea is never satisfied with form. Form of idea is continuously changing with the process of thinking. Form is born anew with each impulse of thinking. Idea is reasserted in new form with each impulse of thinking. All idea of mind is integrated through generative or male sex thinking. All idea of mind is disintegrated through radiative or female sex thinking. All idea of mind is reproduced through the regenerative union of sex thinking, which is equilibrium of sex. Idea of mind may mature or evolve only through sex union. Consider any idea of mind, whether that of individual man or of the Universal One. Man thinks idea. Thinking is the force of motion. All motion is expressed in waves. All waves of motion are both male and female. All motion is oscillatory action and reaction. Action is male. Reaction is female. All idea is registered in light as an appearance of the form of idea. Form of substance is electromagnetic. This means that it is preponderantly male and preponderantly female in periodicity. All idea evolves from idea into form of idea, which in turn devolves back again into idea. Evolution is growth. Devolution is dissolution. Evolution is male. It is electrically preponderant. Devolution is female. It is magnetically dominant. Man can only mature idea through the orderly periodicities of sex thinking. To evolve idea, he must think in light. Genero-active light is the creative force of sex thinking. Radio-active light is the decretive force of sex thinking. Union of these two opposites into the constant of one which is in equilibrium and has impacted in inertia is the reproductive force. Sex is a dimension of the illusion of form, and as such it will be further considered with other dimensions of illusion which will be written down and charted. Chapter 10. The reproductive principle. Reproduction means the repetition of a state of motion. Reproduction is repetition. All phenomena of nature are repetitive. All states of motion are repetitive. All idea of mind is repetitive. Idea of mind is the product of thinking. Repetition of idea is the reproduction of that product. This is a universe of repetition of motion. This is a universe of reproduction. This universe of cause and effect is perpetual and continuous as to cause, and repetitive as to all effects of cause. All effect is caused by thinking and registered in motion. All motion is either an action or reaction of its cause. Nothing is produced as an effect of thinking that is not either the action or reaction of force expressed in motion. That which is produced must be reproduced. No state of motion ever ends. All states of motion are forever reproduced. All states of motion of apparently separate things are actions and reactions of the force which produced them. All varying idea of mind is registered in separate states of motion which have measurable dimensions. The reproduction of all idea is the result of union of the action and reaction which register that idea. Every action is male. Every reaction is female. Every action is electropositive. Every reaction is electronegative. Every action has its equal and opposite reaction. Every action and every reaction is a tone in an octave of the universal constant of energy. Equal and opposite actions and reactions, when united, comprise a unit of an octave of the universal constant of energy. An action and its opposite reaction are not two. Their energies, when combined, make one. Reaction is born of action, and action is born again of reaction. All idea and all forms of idea are the result of union between equal or unequal opposite actions and reactions of force. Perfection of mating lies in the union of exactly equal and opposite male actions and female reactions. In perfection of union lies stability. Imperfection of mating lies in the union of unequal and opposite male actions and female reactions. An imperfection of union lies in stability. Unequal actions and reactions will unite with unwillingness, which increases in proportion to their degree of departure from exact equality in opposition. When the potentials of the opposites are too far removed from equality, then will union cease. In organic life, the union or reproduction of opposites is limited, and beyond the limitations, reproduction is impossible. In the chemistry of inorganic life, the unstable union of unequal and opposite states of motion is also limited, and beyond the limitations, union and reproduction is impossible. This is a universe of reproduction of idea and accumulated potential of the constant of energy, of registration of the soul of idea in inertia, and of reproduction of accumulated potential. The idea of all things is produced by union of opposite actions and reactions under conditions favorable to union, and is reproduced only under similar conditions. Reproduction is governed by the following laws. Unions of opposed actions and reactions are possible only within certain limitations. When union does not take place, there can be no reproduction. Equal and opposite actions and reactions, when united, are satisfied in their unions and will remain united. Stable unions will always reproduce true to species. Unequal and opposite actions and reactions, when united, are unsatisfied in their unions and will always seek their true tonal mates. Unsatisfied unions are unstable unions. Unstable unions never reproduce true to species. Unstable unions tend to return to their separate tonal states. If either mate in an unstable union finds a more equal mate, it will always leave the former and go to the latter. That which is true of chemical unions is true of all species of organic life. Every chemist knows to a certainty that he can break up any unstable compound formed by the union of unequal opposites by merely introducing an element which is more nearly a true tonal mate to either of the united elements. Consider, for example, a chemical union between the male action sodium, which is 601 of the 6th octave, with selenium, which is 702 of the next octave, an unequally opposite female. The introduction of iodine, 801 of the 8th octave, will cause sodium to leave selenium and combine with iodine to form the more stable compound sodium iodide. Introduce bromide, 701 of the 7th octave, and sodium will in turn leave iodine to form sodium bromide, a still more stable compound. Finally, introduce chlorine, which is the true mate, 601 of the 6th octave, and sodium will leave the bromine in order to form the very stable compound, sodium chloride. No element of any octave whatsoever can displace chlorine from its union with sodium. Chemically, every element is both alkaline and acid, but it is preponderantly one or the other. All male electropositive elements are preponderantly alkaline. All female elements are preponderantly acid. The alkaline male actions, when united with equal and opposite acid female reactions, are neutralized. They become salts. Alkaline male actions united with unequal acid female reactions accentuate the acidity or alkalinity. Hydrogen united with its true mate helionin becomes a neutral salt. Hydrogen and fluorine will unite as an acid. Hydrogen and chlorine will unite as a stronger acid. All acids or alkalis increase in their strength as their resentment of unequal union increases. Likewise, the ability to reproduce decreases as the acidity or alkalinity of such unions increases. Chemical elements in union reproduce by the same process by which all other states of motion reproduce. Of this more will be written when further consideration of causes make the effects of those causes more comprehensible. All male actions are centripetal, and all female reactions are centrifugal. Variance of centripetal or centrifugal force is variation of potential. Union and reproduction are always governed by sex periodicity and electromagnetic charge, the order of which will be written down and charted. Consider, for example, the reproduction of the sound of the human voice echoing in the hills. Sound, like all other forms of energy, is an accumulated potential. Release this high potential and it immediately expands. Expansion is radiation. Radiation is discharge of accumulated potential. As the sound of the voice, as accumulated potential, radiates into the silence of higher octaves of lower potential and impacts against the closely integrated high potential of the cliffside, the degenerative discharge is reversed and becomes generative charge. Expanding lowering potential is reversed to contracting higher potential. In other words, the sex opposites in the radiating sound waves are forced into closer contact by the impact so that the wave dimensions which originally produced the sound are restored. The counterpart of the sound as cause has been produced as a reproduced effect of that cause. It is not the same sound, it is another sound. It is a reproduced counterpart, a regenerated reincarnation of the state of motion which originally produced the sound. That which is true of regeneration by echo is also true of reproduction by radio or any other similar process. All are but the reversal of radiation into regeneration by impact against the inertial planes of higher potentials. Generation or regeneration is an effect of gravitation. An impact of radiative energy against any lower octave of integration will set up the necessary resistance to the radiative energy to regenerate it into its original form. Chapter 11. Energy Transmission. Some old misconcepts must now be corrected by a brief statement of principles, the full explanations of which will be given in their proper order. That light travels, energy is transmitted, electricity is conducted or inducted, and that heat radiates from its source to other localities are principles which modern science accepts as fundamental facts. These great misconcepts gave rise to the theory that the ether is a quivering, elastic solid existing in space along the undulating waves of which light, heat, and all forms of energy can travel from one place to another. It is hereby conceded that all motion is expressed in waves, but those waves are not undulating. Energy cannot travel along waves because entire waves do not form in sequence. In other words, one whole wave is not completed before another begins. Waves are but effects which evolve as their cause evolves. Waves reproduce themselves part for part in sequence throughout the universe. Energy, therefore, cannot travel along waves which are not undulating but are reproducing themselves part for part. It cannot leap across waves which are lacking in troughs and crests. Light does not travel, it reproduces itself. The light and heat which appear to come from the star or the sun has never left the star or the sun. That which man sees as light and feels as heat is the reproduced counterpart of the light and of the heat which is its cause. The cause remains in the restricted area of the state of motion where it began its existence as an appearance until it expands into disappearance. That which man sees as a star is not a vision, a picture, an image, or a reflection of the star. It is the exact reproduced chemical counterpart of the star integrated as light within the observer. That which is true of the star is true of the image of the mountain, or the brook, or the meadow violet. No idea of mind is seen at a distance. The state of motion which represents the idea is reproduced as light by regenerative impact within the observer. No idea of mind has place or position in time or space. All idea is universal. All generated states of motion degenerate by expansion. Expanding states of motion regenerate by impact against the inertial planes of higher potential. Man has a higher potential than his surrounding atmosphere. Any object seen by man is a generated potential which is higher than the expanded potential which intervenes between the object and the observer. The higher potential of the object discharges into the lower surrounding potential as the reproduced expanded counterpart of its particular state of motion and recharges within the observer. This reproducing expanding counterpart impacts against the inertial plane of equal pressures which exists somewhere between the object and the observer. This impact causes a reversal of the process of reproduction of an expanding counterpart into reproduction of a contracting counterpart. The expansion of a state of motion is degeneration. The recontraction of expanding states of motion is regeneration. The law of reproducing idea is the principle of universality. All that is of everything else that is. The principle of reproduction is the principle of energy transmission. Energy transmission is conductive and inductive. Conduction is the lowering of high potential toward inertia. Induction is the raising of a low potential away from inertia. The electronegative, dissipative, reaction impulse of energy transmission is conduction. The electropositive, generative, action impulse of energy transmission is induction. Conductive energy resists the completion of the wave. Inductive energy ever leaps ahead in its eagerness to complete the wave. Conductive energy ever pulls toward inertia through the harmonic of the wave. Inductive energy ever pulls toward the overtones of the waves, which are the points of maximum opposition. A state of equilibrium is the state of inertia which exists where pressures of two opposing high potentials of accumulated energy are equalized. Form of idea is a state of potential which is held together as form by the genero-active law of gravitation until it is torn apart by the radioactive law of radiation. All potential is constantly changing and interchanging. The potentials of all things are constantly rising because of their absorption of the discharged energy of all other states of motion. All mass is regenerated by absorption of the impacting radioactive energy of all other mass. Also are all potentials constantly lowering because of their expanded reproduction in the surrounding lower potentials. All mass is degenerated by its own radiation. All mass is generated by accumulation of the universal constant of energy into higher potential. That which is generated must be radiated. All mass is degenerated by release of energy accumulation. Consider, for example, the regeneration of this planet by the radiation of the sun's high potential of energy impacting against its surface. Modern science presumes that heat travels in some mysterious manner across the vast 90 million miles of space between the sun and the Earth, crossing that space in which a temperature of nearly absolute zero prevails, and then arriving here hot. Man feels warmth from the sun, and in some manner it must be accounted for. The theory arrived at is far from the truth. Somewhere in the intervening low potential between the sun and the earth is the inertia plane where the pressures of the potentials of the sun and earth are equalized. Against this inertial plane the sun's cooling and expanding radiation impacts and reverse its expansion into contraction. The cooling, expanding, lowering potential reverses into heating, contracting, rising P potential. By this impact, the expanding radioactive energy is reversed into contracting, generative energy. By the impact of the sun's regenerated light emanations against this planet, all disintegrating matter is regenerated. Every living thing reverses its nightly intent to die and lives again. Flowers which have folded their petals reopen them and grow. Animal life which has closed its eyes in sleep becomes conscious once more and takes on new energy. The modern concept that solar energy is due to contraction is a misconcept. The energy given off from the sun is energy that is being generated within the sun. No energy can be radiated that has not been or is not being generated. All radiating mass is generating. All opposite effects of motion are simultaneous in their expression. The sun is preponderantly generative. It is heating. The sun is in a lesser degree radiative. It is cooling. As the sun heats, it radiates. Radiation disintegrates. As the sun cools, it generates. Generation integrates. Here follows the law of the cycle of appearance and disappearance of form. Cold generates. Generation contracts. Contraction integrates. Integration heats. Heat radiates. Radiation expands. Expansion disintegrates. Disintegration cools. Thus it may be seen that one opposite is always born of the other, which in its turn becomes the cause of the first. Thus it may be seen that the disintegration of the preponderantly generating sun becomes the regeneration of this planet. The coefficient of cold for an expanded volume of mass of low pressure and potential becomes the coefficient of heat for the same mass in a contracted volume of higher pressure and higher potential. The totals of heat and potential have not changed. They have merely changed their dimensions. Nor has heat traveled. It has beckoned reproduced. Magnetic flow in its magnetic orbit has been interrupted. That is all. The voice impacting against the cliff is an exact analogy. The voice regenerates into sound, and the positive charge of the cliff increases because of the impact. The heat from the sun has been disintegrated by radiation into the opposite of heat, which is cold. In radiation, however, the heat energy is not lost. Nothing can be lost. The energy which generated that heat is registered together with the energy which radiated it in an expanded counterpart of them both. No idea of mind, once begun, ever ends. No idea of mind ever began or ever ended. Please stay tuned for chapters 12 through 15. Peace, love, and blessings.